Welcome to episode 24 of the Hunt Backcountry podcast presented by Exo Mountain Gear. We have another uncut episode with Steve and myself tonight, talking specifically about some gear issues and gear questions that we've been getting recently based off of a new video series that we just launched through Exo Mountain Gear. For sure, we cover some gear topics that you'll be interested in, answer some questions, not necessarily about particular items, but more so about kind of gear philosophy and things like that. So, here's the show. Hope you enjoy.
The Hunt Backcountry podcast is proudly brought to you by Exo Mountain Gear, makers of ultralight, ultra-tough packs that are designed to do what you love most, hunt the backcountry. Exo packs are designed for efficiency, simplicity, and durability that's backed by a lifetime warranty. To learn more about Exo Mountain Gear, please visit www.exomountaingear.com.
Well, Steve, let's dive into gear. It's always a fun topic. I guess the whole thing that kind of steered us to do this episode is just the volume of questions that we've been getting based off of a series that we just started with Exo, which is What's in the Pack series. So kind of, I guess, first off, tell us what this series is, and we'll talk about where it's headed.
Yeah, we just wanted to do a video series. But it'll probably be like 10 to 15 videos by the time we're all said and done with it. And every time it's a different guy, basically just going through, hey, I'm going on a early season mule deer hunt or a late elk hunt or whatever, and just kind of the gear that he's going to have with him. You know, everybody has their different philosophies and stuff that they pack with them, and everybody has little tips and tricks, and hopefully everybody out there gets to watch it and watch the videos and get something from it. Even if it's just one little tip that helps them on their next hunt. So we released the video. We did mine first. We did it like 2 weeks ago, and it's probably been well past 100 emails and questions and stuff like that I've received. And so I kind of thought, hey, let's just get a podcast and really talk about not so much the gear specifically, but I think it'd be really cool to kind of get into like one question I got hammered with was people thought I was lying because I didn't have rain gear in the weight or packet with me, and I hardly ever pack rain gear. And so just some of those topics I think we can cover and kind of go into detail on.
Yeah, like you said, it's probably not as much about what each item is, but more the strategy and like a packing philosophy would be awesome, I think.
Yeah.
Before we even get into that, one of the bits of feedback that I got from a few different guys, and we should certainly add to the list to do in this video series, I think would be awesome. And this is more instructional, so I think it would be really helpful, but is not only what are people packing, but how to pack, meaning what should go where, how to, adjust a load, what are some good things to maybe keep more accessible, what are some things, in terms of load distribution that really help the pack fit. So we should definitely get that in the mix as well. Yeah,
that's something on the to-do list for sure, is just properly loading, whether that is your gear or a load of meat and horns, because you can definitely load it correctly and incorrectly and really drastically change how it feels on your back.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess if you guys are listening to this and you haven't seen the video that we'll kind of be referencing tonight, I guess the easiest way probably to get it is just hop on over to exomountaingear.com and then /blog, or you can just catch the blog link from the homepage. And then it'll be, a few posts down there. Alternatively, you can always look, it's on YouTube as well. So if you just kind of search for Exo Mountain Gear, you should be able to find the channel and go from there. So in terms of that, let's go ahead and talk about that first one, Steve. You mentioned kind of was a hot topic item, I guess. Not only when we don't pack rain gear, but some of the specific strategies that we use while hunting to sort of accommodate for having or not having rain gear.
Yeah, that was definitely the big one. I'm pretty much a September, a little bit in October and a little bit in November, but pretty much a September bow hunter as far as my backpacking. So at least here in Idaho, rain is just not too much of an issue. One of my favorite tips is I like to just have a big rubber tote, and and that tote is just kind of in the truck with me when I'm going to the trailhead. And inside of that is going to be backups of a lot of things, like extra headlamp, extra fuel, extra batteries, extra clothes, socks, stuff like that. And rain gear usually is in that in the bin. And the one thing I'm going to do is just basically at the last point of cell phone service, I'm going to check the weather forecast for the next 4 or 5 days. And if it's only calling for 10% chance this day, 20% chance that day of rain, I'm not going to pack rain gear. If it was like 100% this is going to rain for the next 2-3 days, then yeah, you need to probably pack it. One thing I can kind of mention or talk about is maybe what I do isn't for everybody, but I'm willing to sacrifice the slight chance that I may have to hike out of country and versus packing 4 to 5 extra pounds of gear with me that I really don't need. And so some guys maybe that's not an option. For me, it's just like even if you're 10 miles in there, you're only talking 3, 4, 5 hours depending on the terrain to hike out of there. And it's just kind of like, well, I'll take that gamble. So
yeah, I think to give, like that makes a ton of sense to give an alternate perspective to that. I'm typically traveling quite a ways to hunt out west. Mm-hmm. So for me, I don't go overboard, but at the same time, I'm a little bit more cautious with kind of, if I have to pack out, it's, certainly feasible, but it's a last resort because it's not like I get to go back next weekend or in 3 days. Like the time that I have, the 7 to 10 days that I have is the 7 to 10 days that I have. So if that means I have to ride a storm out for a day and a half versus hiking out, then I'm probably going to choose to ride that storm out for a day and a half and then be able to maximize my hunting time as soon as that storm lets up.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, you do the same strategy. I pretty much have contingencies and backups, obviously, as I'm traveling. But it was the same thing for us last year. We checked the forecast, last minute before packing in and leaving the truck. And it was like, yeah, there's 10 to 20% chance of rain on 2 out of the next 7 days. I'm not going to pack rain gear and, we don't need it. Kind of the typical, you might get an afternoon shower in the mountains, but it's going to pass type thing. But certainly not worth packing, a few pounds of gear, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's what it is for me. If you're in Idaho, if we get a storm, it's definitely something that's just going to come through, rain for even a bad one's 3-4 hours. Typically, in my experience, hunting's pretty crappy during a storm. It's going to be really good right after, but during, it's not going to be very good. Animals are going to be bedded down, hunkered up in the trees. Especially something like mule deer. Really, I'm just going to kind of hunker down. Maybe I'll throw my tent up real quick or just hang out underneath the tree and wait for the storm to pass. But to your point, like if I was going to like the Alaska moose hunt we did last year, that's a whole different ballgame. We're dropped off in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I'm absolutely going to have rain gear with me. There's no option to hike back out to the truck and let a storm pass or dry out or whatever. You need to be really prepared. But I think, when you're at your truck is, 4 or 5 miles away, you can take some risks there because it's like a 95% chance that you're not going to need to go back out and interrupt your hunt. So,
yeah.
So there was the video got shared on Rockslide and a guy was on there saying, well, what if it rains? If I'd like to be hiking in the rain during that. And to me, I kind of replied back, well, man, if you're hiking and you got rain gear, I don't care if it's the best rain gear on the market. If you're actually hiking somewhere, actively climbing up and down, you're going to be sweating so much inside of that your base layer is going to be soaking wet anyway. So I will just, if it's raining, unless it's like, I guess if it's really cold, it's going to be snowing, and that's a whole different issue. But if it's raining, it's warm enough that I'll just get down to my like Llano QZ base layer and just hike in that, and I'll let that get soaking wet. And if I get where I finish, I get to the peak or wherever I'm going to set up camp, one thing I'll do, and I do this kind of too, like in the mornings, if I'm just got to like leave camp and hike up a hill, is, you're going to be sweating. When I get to the top of that, I'm going to try to just sit in that Llano as long as I can and let the wind dry it out, my body heat dry that shirt out before I put like my puffy jacket on. and it's kind of miserable for 15, 20 minutes, but it's going to dry out a lot faster if you don't put a bunch of layers on top of it. Let that wind and your body heat together, work together to dry it out. And then once I get freezing cold, then I'll throw my puffy jacket on. So, but yeah, that'd be, I said, I'm just, especially if I'm hiking, I'll just, even if I have a rain jacket, I probably wouldn't wear it just because this, sweat is going to be so bad anyways. You might as well just hike in your lightest base layer that you have.
Yeah. So are there I mean, obviously for Alaska and that you mentioned, but are there situations where in Idaho in September you have had rain gear and we're glad you had it, or it's really just a hardly never use it type thing?
I literally I think of like 3 years ago, we had a really late snowstorm, and we left the trailhead with like a foot of snow at the trailhead. And yeah, I had my rain pants and jacket then just to keep dry,
Yeah.
But if that's the only time I can think in the last 6-7 years I've had rain gear with me, especially in September. Like when Jason and I went to Wyoming a few years ago, it rained every single day for the first 3 days, but neither one of us packed rain gear. We just, I think we knew it was going to rain, so we threw trash bags in, it's always a great, it's a super lightweight, great way to keep stuff dry. Mm-hmm. I remember one day I was sitting under a pine tree, and I was pretty well covered there, but my feet were, sitting out kind of in the rain, and so I just put the trash bag and used it like a little sleeping bag, and it worked out perfectly. But one thing that the rain gear kind of brings me to is another point was I highly, 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 highly recommend this to everybody is get a gear list and start really keeping track of what you pack, and then most importantly, when you get back home from that trip, check through what you didn't use, and that's what basically I used, and it took 3, 4, 5 years to really narrow down your gear list to the essentials. A lot of guys pack that extra stuff, and it's just kind of for that just in case scenario, and never really use it. For me, a great example, as bad as this sounds, is extra underwear. I had packed them for years, and I could only think of like a couple of times that I'd bothered to put them on.
Yeah.
So I just stopped packing them. And, granted, I don't do a whole lot of more than 5-day trips. So if it was going to be like 10 straight days out there, yeah, I'd probably pack a pair, I guess. And that way you could kind of alternate drying stuff, washing stuff out in a stream and letting it dry.
Yeah.
But, I the guys that are actually spending more than 5 nights somewhere without hiking back out and relocating, we do a few trips a year that are longer than that, but after 4 or 5 days, frankly, if I haven't killed something, I'm hiking out and driving down the road and hiking to the next spot. So I guess I don't have enough patience to stick out a spot for that long.
Yeah. So I guess extra underwear is one of those things you have back in the bin at the truck then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, extra underwear, extra socks, an extra base Lano QZ, because it probably, even though Merino's really amazing with scent, after 5 days of sweating, especially the September where it can still get plenty warm, it's nice to swap that out. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, the checklist is huge. And then like you said, I mean, most people think of the checklist as here's what I need to bring. So the checklist is total a pre-hunt thing. But as you mentioned, the checklist is as important for post-hunt and really debriefing. What did I actually use? What didn't I use? I mean, I always like baseball. I was like 3 strikes, you're out. If I bring something on 3 trips and I haven't used it, haven't touched it, and it's not an absolute life or death, really, maybe I'm going to need it for a critical emergency type thing. Mm-hmm. You really need to think hard about that point. If you've made, 2-3 solid trips and haven't needed it, you better start thinking, am I ever going to need it? And even if I quote unquote needed it, do I really need it type thing?
Yeah.
For sure, that's a great way to weed things out. And, it goes hand in hand, I think, with the experience factor and with the comfort factor. I mean, so many guys who are new to making extended trips, they're just flat out not going to be comfortable going minimal, and that's probably a good thing. Like, they need to go through that sort of learning phase and experience phase of, okay, here's what I can get away with, and kind of start weeding things down from there. I mean, I think that's one thing where guys see, these online gear lists and see the video, see your pack weight and things like that. They have to realize that it's like the end result that people are seeing is after years of trial and error and
Right.
proving what works and what's necessary for you.
Yeah. That's it. I got called out on one of the forum posts about like, BS. That's not everything you pack. And I think, I was like, yeah, I didn't have my cell phone in there. That's in my pocket the whole time. But yeah, this is everything I pack with me. And it does take time to kind of wither it all down to the essentials. And some guys, frankly, aren't. I was really committed to getting my gear lighter, just just to be more comfortable, be more mobile in the mountains. And I definitely have that less is more mentality of I don't want to take a bunch of extra crap with me. Even if something's a nice little convenience thing, I'm okay with being a little bit uncomfortable when I'm back there. If that means not packing rain gear and maybe if a storm rolls through and I'm wet for a few hours, big deal. I'll take that. So it's definitely something you got to commit to, and I think a lot of guys have a tough time doing that. They'd rather have a 40, 50-pound pack for a weekend trip and know that they could survive any scenario. So
Yeah, and if that's what they want, then more power to them. The lightweight thing isn't for everybody, and it's not. It's not about hitting a number, and it's not about bragging about your number. It's simply, you prefer to hunt with lighter gear, you prefer to be more mobile, etc. And if another guy prefers to hunt with more, I don't want to call them luxuries, but just, more accommodations, then great. That's the way they want to hunt. More power to them,
Yeah. One thing that really drove me to getting lighter was when Lenny and I started hunting together, when we started packing up camp every morning. For the first, 3 years we hunted together, I think most guys, you hike in, you're 2 or 3, 4, 5 miles, whatever it is, and set up a base camp and kind of hunt from there. And then, it's probably, I'm always terrible with my dates, but it's been at least 4 seasons ago, we started, packing up camp every morning. And frankly, that really changed how we hunted. I think you're so much more efficient, even though you've got a heavier pack on your back all day long. You're where you want to be right when you wake up. You're waking up right. You only got a side hill a few hundred yards to where you want to be to get into the elk moving, out of their feeding areas to the bedding areas, or you're right where you want to be glassing for mule deer in the morning, and you don't have. We used to waste, one of our favorite elk hunting spots where our base camp was to where the elk were. I think we'd hike like a mile and a half and climb like 1,500 feet every frickin' morning to get into there and then drop back out in the evening in the dark. And it's just a lot of wasted time and energy.
Yeah.
So that kind of led back to like, all right, I'm going to strip all my gear down to just the essentials, get this as light as I can, so that I could hunt more effectively.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about like in that situation, that hike in and out, each morning and each evening, is that really saving any sort of energy exertion versus not having to make that mileage but carrying your weight, all day?
Yeah.
Like it's one side and another, and either way, you're putting in some work.
Yeah. I mean, I after doing both, I'm convinced you expend way less energy just having camp on your back all day long.
Yeah.
And we hunt more patiently too, because typically we're where we want to be versus feeling like you're chasing the sunrise or chasing sunset,
Yeah.
Like, oh, I got to get to this point, just put your head down and start humping it. I got to get over here, and half the time you end up blowing up an elk or something that wasn't where you're expecting it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a huge fan of just packing up camp every morning, and it really opens up the country too, because you're not like, oh man, we're kind of getting far away from the tent, we better turn around. When there's an elk bugling another half a mile further away from your tent, and you're like, it's getting dark. Should we? Shouldn't we? Kind of discussion. When camp's on your back, it just doesn't matter where you end up. You just find a flat spot and pitch your tent. And we've had.
Yeah.
That is the one downside, is there's been times we've stumbled around in the dark for an hour because you're on the side of a mountain and you can't find a place to pitch your tent, which that's a whole other topic of tents and why, my whole evolution of all the different tents I've used is finding one with a really small footprint, because there's a lot of times we're making, carving out deer beds to pitch our tents, and there's just not flat ground is, not exactly readily available in most of the places we hunt.
Yeah. So a couple questions on that and that whole approach to hunting. You know, you clearly don't have to keep in mind as you're hunting throughout the day, oh, we're getting so far from camp, we better rein it in, or, you know, we're getting so far, we're not going to make it, so we got to head back at a certain time, etc. The alternative, I guess, to that is, do you keep in mind how far you are wandering in any direction and or in distance from the trailhead or the truck? Because, you know, like say you start day one of the hunt, you hike in 3 miles, 4 miles, you hunt day 2, you know, you're not necessarily paying attention, but, you know, you're kind of going after animal activity or what have you. You end up another 2-3 miles. Like you do that for, say, 4 days, and now you turn around and you're like, oh crap, we're, you know, 13-14 miles from the truck.
Yeah.
I mean, are you keeping that in mind at all?
Yeah, absolutely. With mule deer, not so much, especially if there's 2 of us. You know, a boned out mule deer, even just solo, you know, I'm looking at 110 to 120 pounds tops with all my gear, all the meat and the horns. You know, you can pack anything out. You know, but if you got 10 miles to go, it's going to suck, but you're going to be able to do it. Elk's kind of a different story for sure. You know, I think Lenny and I have like a self-imposed 5 to 6 miles, and obviously that depends on the terrain. But that's kind of the practical, because you're looking at 2 full trips, and, you know, each trip's going to be at 115, 120 pounds. And that's really a 2-day operation. September, it's hot. Yeah, you know, you better not get too much further than that, in our opinion, you know, with 2 guys. If you got a 3rd guy, yeah, you could probably get that out in 1 trip. You know, and I hear people say they pack out an elk in 1 trip, and, you know, maybe some do. I'm probably pretty like, I wonder how much meat you left on the mountain if you did that, you know?
Yeah.
But
having done it, I mean, I can say it's not like, it's not something you should strive to do, plan to do, or brag about doing. Like, it's absolute, like, if you've legitimately, like, 2 dudes in 1 trip packed out an elk, it is absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you got to be 140 pounds, 50 pounds. I mean, that's bare minimum. That's depending on the size of the elk. Obviously, a spike would be a lot smaller than an old mature bull. So, yeah, it's, I don't know, save my knees. And we used to try to do, you know, the heaviest loads that we possibly could. And now it's just kind of like, I'll just do 2 light loads and call it good. So,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's keeping in mind, one thing is distance in terms of your physical capabilities and can you do 2 trips at the distance. But the other thing is what you mentioned is, you know, a lot of times we're talking about September, potentially warm. It's the time factor. I mean, do you have time to make, you know, 2 trips or potentially more, right, you know? So for sure, keep in mind the physical aspects of it, but, you know, keeping that meat preserved is a race against the clock in some instances.
Yeah, for sure. One tip we've done is, you know, we'll kind of pack meat out in chunks of the whole total hike. So say you're 5 miles in and it's 2,000 feet up, 2,000 feet down. We'll get all that meat to the ridge because that's when you're going to have your most energy is the beginning of that, and then do the trips down the mountain back out to the truck on the second half.
Kind of
I think a lot of guys, yeah, exactly, leapfrog it. It's just a good little tip because you're going to have a lot more energy, you know, at the beginning of that than you are at the end.
Yeah. So another question, kind of a different topic, but didn't want to forget about it because got a few comments and questions based on the video. And then also this kind of relates to the style of hunting that we've been talking about where you're just hunting off your back. What precautions do you take with bears in the area that you hunt, if any? You know, are you hanging your food each night? You lost me. Yo.
You there?
Yep, you got me?
Oh. Yeah, you came back. I lost you on what precaution you take with bears.
Okay. So what precautions do you take with bears at night, if any, as you're kind of, you know, just hunting from your back? And, you know, a couple guys I saw mentioned you you didn't necessarily have anything specific, at least by appearances, to deal with hanging food or anything at night.
Yeah, we basically do zero precautions with worrying about bears. Um, we're not in grizzly country. There's some places in eastern Idaho, Wyoming that you'd have to worry about that. Obviously, Alaska. I guess I've just not been too afraid of black bears. I mean, heck, half the time we sleep with food right there, a foot away from our head inside the tent. Maybe some guys are thinking we're stupid and crazy for that, but no, we don't pack, bear canisters. I don't pack bear spray. I don't pack a pistol with me. Really don't do anything as far as defense or, preventing something. I guess that's a commitment to being lightweight. Sounds crazy, but just, I mean, I guess a lot of it's from experience. I mean, we run into bears and they run the other way. I've never, even sows with cubs, I've never actually had a scenario where I was ever scared.
Yeah.
So it's frankly a non-issue. Don't ever think about it.
Yeah.
About the only thing I guess I do is just like my mountain house meal. Once I eat it and seal it back up, I usually set that a little way away from camp because that's kind of definitely a fresh, smelling new cooked food thing. Where everything else is like a protein bar and it's all wrapped up in something and not gonna be a whole lot of scent going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wonder if the vast majority of, bears in the wild out in that environment are basically, I guess, satisfied or so self-sustained on their normal diet and their normal patterns that it's clearly not equivalent to dealing with bears who are around human activity, human trash, human scent, human food by nature. Like, clearly, so if you're in some sort of established park or in some sort of like semi-suburban area where there's bears who are sort of used to encountering humans and kind of know like what food they can gather, I think that's totally different than dealing with bears in the backcountry who, that's probably, yeah, they can pick up the scent, but they're not as, I guess, almost trained to go after those sources. I wonder if there's any difference there.
Yeah, I would say absolutely because there's some places here in Idaho where bears frequent like dumps and up by a lake called Warm Lake. There's a lot of bears around some campgrounds up there, and they're used to stealing food and stuff like that. And in a scenario like that, yeah, absolutely, you'd want to get your food away from your tent and have a bear canister or whatever. But yeah, I've never ever had a bear do anything other than run as fast as it possibly can away from me. So it's just not something when I'm out there that I'm worried about.
Yeah. Cool. So one other thing, and this is a bit of a gear question, and also kind of relates to the philosophy of hunting off your back as well. Is you're just kind of, you end up where you end up at night. Is water ever a factor in your mind in terms of where you're ending up, and how are you sort of doing your water strategy throughout the day to make sure you have enough?
Yeah,
and then,
absolutely.
And then talk, I guess, a bit about, some of the questions, I guess, briefly kind of talk about your water setup that was featured in the video.
Yeah. Water, I think just in general, everybody could drink more of it. Like a couple of years ago, I got to where I drink, 200 ounces of water a day. I have these big 50-ounce things, and I just drink water all day long. And I just notice in a daily life just how much better I feel and don't get sleepy in the afternoons and stuff like that. When you're in the backcountry, that's 10 times more important because you're expending a lot of calories and you're dehydrated. And I think a lot of guys don't realize the effects of dehydration, creeping up on them. They're just getting tired and sluggish and they got a little headache and think it's just part of the hunt, and really staying hydrated is critical. That being said, water is the equivalent to gold back there. Without it, you're pretty much screwed. And, there's times when, especially in new country, it's really tough. You just don't know where you're going to get water from. I guess I can jump into the system I use it's called Platypus Hoser Bladder. Super lightweight, really just good durable bladder. And then I have a Sawyer squeeze filter, and then I use another Platypus. They call it a 2 liter bag. It holds about 2.5 liters of water, and that is my dirty water bag. So basically, you fill up that dirty water bag in the stream, in the lake, the spring, whatever. Screw the filter on, and then you have a Sawyer inline fast fill adapter, which basically you take a pair of scissors, cut your bladder tube, that your hose. Cut it in half. I like to do it right where it pops out of the pack. And you just basically connect the filter right into that. You never have to take your water bladder out of the pack. You just squeeze the water, fill it up. About the only pain is you just kind of got to like feel for how full did you get the bladder. Usually you'll start feeling a lot of resistance on the filter because it's kind of just getting full. But it's not like a visual thing. Maybe sometimes I'll open up the pack just to see how full the bladder is. But it's an awesome system, and it also basically, at any given point, I have the ability to pack about 6 liters of water with me. And on like our early season mule deer hunts, typically there's not water. I actually can't think of anywhere we hunt where there's water within 500 to 1,000 feet of the top. And you're going to go up there and spend a lot of time up there. So, usually it's like every other day you're going to have to drop all the way down somewhere, get your water, fill it up, come back up there. And when you're going to new country, it's something you really have to account for, and maybe you do need to conserve your water and only drink so much per day. That being said, like when I'm in elk country that I know, heck, just to be lightweight, I'll only ever have like 2 liters of water with me at any given time because I know there's another spring or a stream, half a mile up the canyon. So drink as much as you possibly can, but definitely pay attention to where it is. And frankly, if you're going in somewhere blind, during hunting season, a lot of this stuff we're going in somewhere we're scouting, we figure out where the water sources are, and you definitely have to plan your hunt around it. If you're know you're going to run out of water, you probably need to hunt your way back towards that water source, that evening or that morning or whatever it is, and get water filled back up.
Yeah, for sure. I use a really similar setup and can't overstate, I think, how important that dirty bag is, because if you look at, like, say you're a guy who's using a pump, or you're a guy who's using a Sterapin, or you're using chemicals or whatever. So that filtration method is one thing, and each of those can be effective, and each has their pros and cons. But I think the really nice thing about having this setup that you just described is you have a clean bladder, that's what you're drinking from. You have a separate bladder, that's your dirty water. That's what, the source is that you're capturing and then filtering in between. Man, just can't overstate how nice it is to be able to not only filter from that dirty bladder, but just have that dirty bladder hold water, retain water, and then you always have it. Mm-hmm. I mean, as you mentioned, you can maybe have 2 liter drinking bladder, but then maybe you have like a 4 liter dirty bladder. Well, now you can carry 6 liters at a time. Whereas if you just are relying on a pump and you have your single drinking bladder, now you're constrained volume-wise to pumping your clean bladder and only having at that moment however much water that clean bladder holds, which is probably 2 to 3 liters.
Yeah.
Same can be said for, chemical treatments and Sterapins and things like that. So just that idea of that filtration method is nice, but then the idea of having that extra bladder, I mean, all the time I'm filling mine up, especially like towards the evening if we run across water. Mm-hmm. I'll fill that dirty bladder up and always have it back at camp, and it's just nice insurance, I guess.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I mean, there's been times when maybe I'm running low on water in my main bladder, and we're crossing a creek and there's an elk bugling, up there. I'll stop and fill that sucker up real quick. You don't have to worry about filtering it and taking the time to do that. Throw it in the pack, go hunt the elk, and when cool thing about that Sawyer is it can gravity filter. So
just hang it up.
If I got time, I just, on that back of that little Platypus 2 liter bladder, I just tied a little piece of parachute cord in. I'll just hang it from a tree, and in like 15 minutes it'll filter all that water, fill up your main bladder, and you're good to go.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing, I guess, getting back into packing strategy a little bit that I know you're a huge advocate of is not having all kinds of particular stuff sacks and containers and things like that, and more taking a loose approach into how you actually pack your gear. So talk a bit about the advantages of that philosophy of doing things like not having a dedicated stuff sack for your sleeping bag, etc.
Yeah, I actually picked up, there's a lot of things I picked up from Lenny, and that's one of them is, when I first started hunting with him, he never used a stuff sack, and I thought he was crazy. And then I actually started doing it, and I was like, holy crap, man, this is awesome. One, it's a heck of a lot faster to tear down camp in the morning because you're not rolling up everything and stuffing it in these small little sacks. And two, it carries a lot better in the pack. And the best analogy I can think of is, you're going to ship out a box, and you got this cardboard box, and you got a bunch of hard things in it. And you're going to put packing bubbles in there to keep things from shifting and moving around on you. Well, basically, we use our sleeping bag and our tent as those packing bubbles. So I'll put it really loosely, usually kind of put the majority of it at the bottom of the pack, but then I'll kind of let the sleeping bag drape up through the rest of the bag. And that way, when I go to put my jet boil in there, it's kind of insulated around the sleeping bag. It's not rattling around, not making a bunch of noise, and things just carry a lot better. I get some people asking me, well, what if, that gets wet or something like that? And, I guess that is a concern. If I knew I was going to be heading into like 4 days of rain, I'd probably put that in like a large dry bag, maybe not one where I have to roll it up and really tight, but something that's going to keep it dry. Another thing is that trash bag that I mentioned earlier, depending on the hunt, I'll throw one of those or two of those in the pack, and you could put your gear inside of that to keep it dry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth and kind of packed both ways. I typically do have a compression sack that's also a dry sack that I could use, like, for example, if there's going to be storms, and sort of keep my sleeping bag isolated. The other reason I carry it is we typically do have sort of a backcountry base camp style, and I guess going back to bears, we typically hang our food from camp because there's food sitting there usually for days. So it is more of a temptation or chance encounter with bears. And so it's one of those things, and I guess this is a larger principle for me. The 2.2 ounces, I think, that my dry sack compression sack provides a little bit of safety or insurance in terms of my sleeping bag or clothes that I want to keep dry. And then at the same time, when I'm at camp, it's just super handy to throw my week's worth of food in there and then have that hung up, which I guess is another principle to keep in mind. If you do have an item, look for as many items as you can that can be multi-purpose, multi-use, and look for ways to, kill two birds with one stone and maybe condense gear by simply getting, more value out of a single item, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's critical to, having something that can do double, triple duty. You're just saving yourself, weight and just frankly crap in your pack.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess this is heading back a little bit, roughly talking about the rain gear, but clothing in general, as I know, one thing that appears to be extremely light or sparse in your kit. You kind of mentioned already you don't have, extra underwear. Would you carry typically like one pair of extra socks?
I do, yeah. I always have one pair of extra socks, and I rotate them around constantly. I'll wear one during the day, and then I'll pull it out or take them off, put on fresh socks at night, and I'll actually hang the dirty socks like inside my tent so they can kind of air out and dry out during the night. And then if they're nice and dry, I'll put them back on in the morning, and I'll try to run those dirty socks as many days as I can. And then I'll just keep putting the clean ones on at night and, going to bed. And but then, if it's a prolonged hunt, say it's day 5, take advantage of when you come across a creek or something like that and, rinse them out in there, wash them up a little bit, and then just hang them off the back of your pack. Let them dry out while you're hiking. And then you got, basically a semi-fresh pair of socks to start wearing again. And I'll do that with my clothes as far as, my llano. If we're waiting on a mule deer to bed down and somehow we're by water. There was a scenario a couple years ago with Jason where we were down the bottom and waiting for this buck to bed, and man, freaking did a load of laundry down there at the creek, let everything dry out. And we're just kind of hanging out in the sun for a few hours waiting for that buck to bed down and the winds to shift on us. So definitely something that, it's especially nice just to just kind of wash that stuff out when you can. And heck, I'll take a little mini shower in the creek when I can as well.
Yeah.
Or bath, I guess.
Right. It's interesting to see. I think this is something that, is one of those precautionary or safety or just kind of comfort items. But I especially see hunters who are newer to backpack style hunting wanting to bring things like 2 pairs of pants, the pants that they're wearing and then an extra pair of pants, or
right.
like this level of jacket and that level of jacket, like a puffy and a soft shell or things like that. Mm-hmm. And again, if you're new to it, I kind of understand where you're coming from for sure. But at the same time, I just haven't encountered scenarios where that's ever really necessary,
Yeah, again, it's people, you pack the extra pair of pants or you don't, and the guy that does is like, well, what happens if you get wet, and it's like, I'm okay with being wet and uncomfortable for a few hours while those pants dry back out. It's, I don't know, I guess I maybe don't take the first aid safety side of it serious enough, because I just look at it like, man, even if I had a broken arm, I'm going to just hike out of that country, and that is a nice, off on a little tangent, I got that DeLorme InReach last year, and Spot has their satellite messenger. I think every hunter should probably invest in something like that, just as a safety precaution. So if I were hunting solo and stepped off a rock, broke my leg, I got sandwiched in between rocks, you're going to be able to push that button and get out of there alive. But I guess, I'm just not, I don't know. It'd be a different, if it's November, I'm packing, a few extra. I'd actually probably never pack extra pants with me, but I'm going to definitely take, some more cold weather gear. Definitely have long johns with me, extra shirt, stuff like that. But I just don't look at it as a life and death situation. Again, maybe if I was dropped off in the Frank Church Wilderness here in Idaho, that could be life and death. You're 25 miles any direction from, civilization. But our typical hunts where you park at a trailhead or park off the side of the road and hike in there 3-4 miles, man, I just don't see it being that big of a deal.
Yeah. So I'm curious, we have talked kind of about some big items and clearly mentioned how minimal your gear list is or appears to be, or the feedback you've gotten about that. But what kind of little accessory type items do you bring? Do you get a lot of value of, or other little tips or tricks for managing the smaller items like, lights or anything else like that?
One thing I do, we can get into a little bit, is like first aid wise, I have a few bandages and gauze pads and stuff with me, but I have a ton of duct tape, that Gorilla black tape. That stuff's amazing. And I'll take that and wrap it around my lighter. I'll wrap some around my Sawyer water filter. Inside my little first aid kit, I have a little mini Sharpie. I wrap a bunch of it around that. And I've kind of figured with that duct tape, you could just about patch up anything you need to get yourself out of somewhere. And I also have like a needle and thread inside that. So if you got cut really bad, you could sew yourself up. So duct tape is one thing. And I said, I just wrap it. I don't throw a roll in there. I just take like a 2-foot strip and wrap it around this, wrap it around that. Another thing that's been, that I've packed with me forever, and hasn't saved my butt as much as like Jason or Lenny, or I think even Tyler, everyone at one point has forgotten their headlamp. I always blame Lenny because he never puts together, I have to send him my gear list. He's never actually put together his own. And he's always forgetting something like his headlamp or a fork or things like that. One good reason to have a good detailed gear list. But Cabela's makes it. It's a little LED hat clip light. It runs off like watch batteries. It weighs absolutely nothing. And it's just awesome. I've had that in my little first aid kit forever. Used it quite a few times. Jason once used it on an entire 3-day trip. No issues, gives you enough light to get around and manage, and definitely a great little backup item. So you definitely don't want to run out of a light source when you're back there. There's a lot of time in the dark and kind of a pain in the ass if you're blind.
Yeah. I guess one thing that popped into my head while we were talking about the smaller items, talk about the outdoor edge knife that you use, because have been, and I know that you have been in years past, a Havalon guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we were at ATA this year, you showed me the outdoor edge stuff with their replaceable blades, and
Yeah.
I mean, instantly I was sold on the benefits of the outdoor edge over the Havalon. Not at all saying that the Havalon's bad. It's great. It's light. It's freaking scary sharp. But the outdoor edge, I think, has some differences that are probably worthwhile to consider.
Yeah, I mean, the outdoor edge, literally, I just found out about it last year in Alaska. Lenny had picked it up, and we were on the moose hunt, and he busted that thing out, and I started like skinning his moose with it, and I was like, holy crap, this thing's sweet. Havalon's been great. I've had it for 3 or 4 years. My only complaint, well, 2 things. One, I'd break blades a lot, and 2, I'd cut myself a lot because it is so damn scary sharp. I mean, I swear, like every animal we butchered, there'd be some little nick. It's just so crazy sharp that you can't get away with anything. And I'm sure somebody would tell me to slow down and not take more time when you're processing your animal. But man, it's either hot or it's pitch dark. There's never this ideal scenario where I have 3-4 hours to really take my time on an animal. It always seems like we're in a rush to get it butchered up and cooling down, or to get it butchered up and get hiking out of there. So that's where the outdoor edge, the one I have is called the Razor Blaze. It's it's like 3.1 or 3.2 ounces, so it's not super, super light, but definitely a lot lighter than a traditional fixed blade knife. And what I really like is just it's got some backbone to it, so you can really kind of dig into bones. When you're working on an elk and you're trying to get the knee apart, it's just got more of a backbone to it to kind of dig into things. And then also the blades are really easily replaceable. There's just a little push button at the front of the handle. You push it down, pull the blade out. Havalon, you got to freaking pack pliers with you half the time, or I mean, you could kind of work on it, but again, they're so freaking scary sharp. You're kind of scared you're going to cut yourself. So Havalon's great. Caping out ahead, Havalon, I'd much rather have that because it is sharper and a little bit more precise. But in general, doing the heavy duty work, I think that outdoor edge is really a solid choice.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be checking one out for sure. The blade, as you mentioned, is a bit beefier. You don't break as many. And then the changing process, especially, I mean, as you mentioned, I literally do pack a mini tiny multi-tool with pliers just to change blades, because once you have a Havalon and you got blood on your hands and fat and gunk in the blade, it's tough to change without slaughtering yourself. And most of the time I end up breaking the blades while I'm changing them as well.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, they're kind of a pain in the butt to change out. So that's what, again, that outdoor edge it's a really good choice. Kind of perfect combination of a traditional knife and, a razor sharp replaceable blade style.
Yeah. Cool. So we're coming up on time. Is there anything else specifically that you wanted to cover?
I'm just looking at my gear list here. Butt pads on there. I built a custom one out of some foam we use for the backpack and glued some Cordura to it. It's really nice to have when you're, especially on a mule deer hunt, because there's 90% of your day, if you're doing it right, you're sitting on your butt glassing, that early season. Nice to have that.
Make that an accessory in the future, man.
Yeah, we're working on it. Man, clothing. Yeah, if you watch the video, I take a Lano QZ, a Chama hoodie, an Uncompahgre puffy with me. Those 3 items. I swear, if it's 15 degrees and I'm hiking, I'm plenty warm, and if it's 90 degrees, I'm down to that Lano QZ and have it half unzipped with my sparse chest hair poking out and calling it good. And I'm trying to think. Food. I think we've kind of covered that in a past issue or episode, but really basic. Just again, I didn't start refining my food till a few years ago. But count your calories. Just make sure you're getting at least 3,000 a day, and put your food in baggies. So before I leave, I got if it's a 5-day trip, I got 5 little bags with me. That way, You don't overeat, you don't undereat. You just make sure by the end of the day you eat your bag, eat your Mountain House for dinner, and you're getting enough calories and you're not overeating and you're going to be starving later in the trip. Rope, game bags, some of that other stuff. To each their own. Everyone's got their favorite game bag that they like to use. I use the super light tag bags. They're not perfect, but they work good enough for me. That's pretty much it. Except if we posted the gear list on the blog there with that video, and take a look at it. You'll be surprised at just how few items there really is that goes into the pack. And again, I encourage everybody to create a checklist. Before a trip, I'll print out, just like 20 of them in late August and just have them sitting here in my hunting closet at my house, and I'll just grab it. As I put an item in the pack, I check it off, and once I get through the whole list, there's no worry. I've got everything with me. I don't have to think twice about it, and I can go. Another little tip, depending on how much you hunt, for me this was huge, is I buy stuff in bulk like crazy as far as food goes back in August, usually early August, because I'll use it all through scouting and hunting season. Go to Costco, buy like 4 boxes of protein bars, and I'll pre-order, use the REI 10% discount on your Mountain House meals. Just get all that crap bought, sitting in a bin. That way you're not running last minute when you're trying to get out of town to get food and pick up this or pick up that. I just got everything ready to go. Throw it in the pack, throw it in the truck, and hit the road.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, on food, you kind of covered it. It doesn't have to be rocket science. A is make sure you're getting enough calories, and then B, as you mentioned, packing it. But when it comes to specific items, don't overthink that. Look for things that are palatable, that you can eat, that you enjoy eating, because sometimes, later days in the trip, even though you need to eat, you don't feel like it, so you want to somewhat enjoy what you're eating. And then just really simply, each item, just look at the calorie to ounce ratio. So just do that simple math and figure, okay, this weighs, 2 ounces. How many calories are in there? How many calories am I getting for 2 ounces of weight? And just try and make sure that you're getting at least bare minimum 100 calories per ounce. And you want to be like on average more towards at least like 125. So I think there's 1 or 2 things I pack that are down near 100 calories an ounce, but then there's several more that are like 140, 150. And then on average for a day, I end up being right about like that 125 to 130 calories per ounce. And that's a good way to get that 3,000-ish calories and stay, at 1.5 pounds or so per day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you should be 1.25 pounds, 1.5 pounds, if you got a calorie to weight ratio right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we will for sure, as I mentioned, the gear list and the videos on the blog, exomountaingear.com, and then the show notes for this episode will be exomountaingear.com/24. So if you want to head straight there, we'll have the podcast here, of course, but we'll link that and include the video and take you straight to the post that you want to see. So that is Steve's gear list for September mule deer. As we mentioned in the beginning, there's going to be many more videos coming down the line in this series. So either, hop over to the Exo Mountain Gear YouTube channel and subscribe. Another great way to do that would be to subscribe to the Exo Mountain Gear newsletter. So while you're on the site, just go ahead under the contact heading. There's the newsletter, enter your email. We don't send out a bunch of junk, but we will let you know when there's new products or specials or videos, such as a new video in this What's in Your Pack series. So,
yeah, definitely take a look at the videos. And we got some cool guys coming up. And, one note I wanted to make, too, was just some of these guys, like Travis Nowotny, he's going to do one. The guy's an absolute killer, but he's not necessarily like a gear junkie, Like, I think guys get so caught up in that, oh, man, I got to have the latest this and this and that. It's going to make me a better hunter. At the end of the day, it still comes down to your hunting skills.
Right.
You could be out there with a 70-pound pack and killing animals left and right, and the super light guy that's got $20,000 worth of stuff packing with him isn't killing crap. So we're all gear junkies and it's fun. But I think it's a cool thing about these videos is everyone has their different take on what they do and what they don't do and reasons for it. And sometimes it's just financial. You can't afford the best lightweight gear, but that don't let that stop you from being a great hunter.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great note to end it with. Appreciate you guys listening. Be sure to check back soon for more episodes. Steve, have a good one.
Yeah, you too, bud.